2015 Salon de l'Automobile here in Geneva. It's my great pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Alois Ruf himself, who will be your host this afternoon. My name is Simon Kidston, and Alois is an old friend from Concours d'Elegance events where we've met each other, and he asked me this afternoon if I would have the honor of introducing him and perhaps walking around some of the cars that are here on the stand today. I should begin by saying that I feel something of an imposter here, as my background is in classic cars rather than modern cars. But of course, as we all know, the cars that are introduced here at shows like Geneva are the classics of tomorrow. And perhaps of all the cars that you see here in these hallowed halls here in Geneva, Ruf is one of those companies that has already established itself as a creator of the classics of tomorrow. I was going to say that one of the characteristics in the classic car market that characterizes Ruf's products are the fact that they are generally understated, although that was before I saw the car that's in front of us here today. One thing I will say, though, that I remember from many, many years ago, my background is in classic car auctions, it always struck me, many years ago, we were asked to sell a Ruf Porsche, one of the cars from the 1980s. And the distinction that this car has, I don't think I've told you this before, is that in the 1980s, when Phil Hill was invited to test the greatest sports cars of the era, Ruf, their demonstrator car, was already committed elsewhere. So Ruf went to one of their customers and asked to borrow back a car for this very important high-speed test. And the client lent the car to the magazine. I believe it was it Road and Track, I think? And the car duly beat all the opposition. It was the fastest car, and Phil Hill, 1961 Formula One world champion, had nothing but praise for this car. But the amazing thing about that car is that it was the daily driver of the client, and he had already done 200,000 kilometers in it. And when I sold it, this is in the late 90s, it had done 500,000 kilometers. And how many other supercars could you use on a day-to-day basis without attracting unwanted attention that look like, dare I say, an everyday car to most people, and only to the conoscenti will they recognize that it's something very, very special. And that badge is not, as Alois is justifiably proud of pointing out, it's not just another tuning company. This is a bona fide manufacturer of cars. Great sports cars today and the classics of tomorrow. I've said enough. Let me introduce you to Mr. Alois Ruf, who will explain to you, delve into the secrets of some of the cars that he is unveiling to you here today.
Thank you, Simon. Simon, you have proven that your knowledge is very, very profound. Because I met him at an event like this where he was talking to the audience, and I thought, wow, this man can talk. But then I learned that he does not only talk, he has a knowledge, very profound. And what you just said is a very much of an insider story. Thank you very much for announcing it so well. Thank you. But ladies and gentlemen, let me show you what we are featuring this year in Geneva for the 85th Salon Automobile. I will start over here with our oldest friend here, which is the 1967 911 Targa. Now this car is in my possession for over 40 years. It has a special meaning. It has been restored over 30 years ago. And I'm showing this car here because it will lead us to the successor over here, the new model series, which is based on a Targa. This one here shows what the Targa idea was about in the 60s. The idea was to defeat the requirements that were just born at that time from the Department of Transportation in the United States, when they wanted to ban all open cars, all cabriolet type cars, because of severe accidents that have happened before. So the idea was ein Sicherheitscabriolet, a safety convertible with a safety bar. And when you opened the car from the top and the rear, the car felt like a full cabriolet. And you could really have the fun of the engine sound, and it was right next to your ear, which was special about this car. Now I'm going to the new interpretation of the Targa that Porsche announced 2 years ago here in Geneva. And this is our version, which is called the TurboFlorio. The TurboFlorio.
Sorry, can I just say that has to be the best name of any car here in the show, the TurboFlorio. Congratulations for that alone. Well, the story of Mr. Florio, Vincenzo Florio, was a very wealthy Sicilian nobleman who decided to create his own motor race in Sicily at the turn of the 20th century. I think 1906 was the first year. And the TurboFlorio became not only the oldest, but also the most grueling, the most demanding road race in the world, even before the Mille Miglia, which of course didn't start until the late 1920s. And Porsche took the name of the Targa 911 from the TurboFlorio because Porsche was a make that had been so successful on that in that race. They won it a multitude of times. And one of the particularities of the TurboFlorio, your car didn't have to be just powerful. This was a course that from memory was 72 kilometers long. Imagine trying to learn a 72 kilometer course. 72 kilometers long and very, very twisty. So the requirements for this race to be successful were not only outright speed, but also agility and, of course, reliability, which, as we all know, are always been characteristics of Porsche.
Now you know a little bit more about Florio. We said the Florio gave the name to this car. The drivetrain is a 630 horsepower turbo drivetrain with a double clutch gearbox. The air intakes are handmade and handcrafted by our staff that are true craftsmen and artists and working on sheet metal. So this is a very subtle way to show the air intake, to prove that it is a turbo, because this air needs to go to the intercooler, to cool the intercoolers, that the turbo drivetrain fits into this car. The ducktail is static, it's not moving, it's always there like this. We also rounded off the whole rear end and we made a few changes here to bring more of the earlier 911 characteristic of the rear end. And the ducktail should be a little reminiscent of the RS73, which was the first generation of an aerodynamic aid of the 911.
And which also, if I can be nostalgic once again, was the last car ever to win the TurboFlorio. So the Carrera RSR in 1973 was the last car ever to win the original TurboFlorio. So it seems appropriate that the TurboFlorio deserves to wear this same aerodynamic appendage, which, as you say, was the first spoiler of its kind at the rear of a production road car. And I think originally in the 70s it was difficult to be homologated.
Very difficult at the beginning, but we are now very much into the history. But today, a rear spoiler is a regular attribute of every car and aerodynamic car. Now here, this is the RGT 4.2. This is the strongest normal aspirated engine that we offer, with 525 horsepower, with a stick shift gearbox, with a manual gearbox only. And you see also the fender flares on this car, which is our wider version of this automobile. And the fender flares are bolted on, which gives the car a very distinctive look, like the idea like muscles growing out from the body of the car.
Tell me a little bit about this next one, Alois, because I noticed this car has the riveted wings, which has become very, very iconic on some of the earlier Porsche homologation specials. This one, on the other hand, has a smoother look. These wings, although they look wider, they're actually the same as on the white car, aren't they?
The width is identical for both cars, but these fender flares are handcrafted by pedal beaters in our company. And the specialty is that the front fenders are in aluminium, so it's a completely different method of making the fender flares rather than in the back where it is a steel. But as you see it, it looks like it has always been like this and in one shape. It has been completely crafted by our artists, I have to call them artists, that are doing this job in our company. Now this car is powered with the strongest engine that we have ever presented. 805 horsepower, 980 newton meters of torque. So this is what we call the real hammer of a 911 based car. It's also available only with the manual shift, because it's the only gearbox that can handle that kind of torque. And the car, I think, makes a very strong statement as it is here. And it has all the muscles in the world.
And yet, typically as a roof product, it's what you might define in English as an iron fist in a velvet glove. Because if you leave aside the bright colour, presumably one doesn't have to have it in blue, it's a car that is relatively understated. It's certainly as understated as any car I've ever seen that has 805.